Right, I guess we can start. So, hi everyone, I'm happy to see you all here. My name is Paweł. I used to be a developer, but then I kind of migrated to the dark side, and I'm taking care of several teams of DevOps and developer folks at Xibia Poland. You can find us in the hall with the big inflatable duck, and we should have a new batch of craft beer, so come and say hi. Okay, going back to our topic today. So, who of you knows what is impostor syndrome and how it works? Raise your hand. Okay, we have quite a few people, but you still are here. I want to know more. That's good. All right, so that's our plan. To be on the same level, let's say, we start with what is impostor syndrome, what is not an impostor syndrome, who should be concerned, right? We'll dive into a little bit of background. What was the research on that? We look at the, let's say, the thinking of a person with impostor syndrome. So what's happening in those heads? We'll look at some risks. So what can go wrong in the end? In what dark places we can find ourselves at the end? We look at some psychological mechanisms. Knowledge about those mechanisms and biases in our thinking is helpful by itself, but then we'll have some concrete tips on how to deal with that. All right, so let's start with a background. So what is an impostor syndrome? This is a psychological pattern or mild personality disruption, let's say, where a person doesn't believe their skills, their competence. They don't think that they should be at the place they are. So for instance, I'm a senior developer or DevOps, and I don't think that I should be promoted from mid developer, or I'm junior, I was hired in a new company, and I think that, well, I shouldn't be hired in the first place. And there's a constant fear that somebody at some point will find out and take everything away from us, right? So my boss will find out, my colleagues will find out, I will be fired, I will be demoted, I will lose everything, my wife leaves me, my dogs leave me, my fishes leave me, stuff like this, right? And it's constant, so it's not like, I know, weeks or something, it's months or even years. So the brief history on that, there was a research in the more or less 70s, done in the environment of high-achieving women in academia and in business. Initially, it was thought that impostor syndrome is about women, but then later research proved that it affects both genders. And the common theme was that in those environments, there was a thing that, hey, I shouldn't be in this place. If I'm a director, if I'm a doctor, I have lots of research papers, stuff like this. They believe that they really don't deserve that, they are not too good, and there's this theme that somebody at some point will find out. So who should be concerned? Basically, depending on the research you look at, it's 50, 80, even 90% of people at some point in their lives are in this state of impostor syndrome. So basically, probably like half of us when we are sitting here. It might happen at any stage of your career. When you are starting, you are a junior, you don't believe in yourself, you just finished university, got a first job. When you switch your career, you go from, let's say, QA to development, maybe from development to DevOps, to architect, to manager, something like this. You might have some doubts about yourself, and especially if you are at somewhere really high. You're a director, like chief architect, or something like this, or a celebrity. Right, some high expectations of you, and this distance between how you think about yourself and what are the expectations might get really huge. It's connected with high intelligence, because people who are intelligent have this tendency to overthink problems a little bit, right? It's connected with perfectionism. So if we see world in zeros and ones, something is either perfect or it's trash, then it's a bit of a problem. We feel like imposters. It's difficult to assess the quality of our work if it's so binary. And if we speak about the big five of personality traits, there is a neuroticism. People who are highly neurotic have a lot of fear, they think a lot about stuff that might happen wrong, stuff like this. And it's quite connected with the impostor syndrome. So what is not an impostor syndrome? So it's not about being an actual fraud. So if you want to deceive somebody on purpose, right? You say that you know something, you can do something, but you truly cannot. It's not an impostor syndrome. You are just an, well, impostor, right? It's not about momentary doubts, because basically all of us at some point have this thoughts that I'm not good enough, it will be a disaster, something like this, but it's momentary. Impostor syndrome is prolonged, it's months, years. It's not about humbleness, right? Humbleness per se is a good trait, but if it stops you from doing nice things, learning, going out from your comfort zone, then it's a problem. And as mentioned, it's not really specific to women. Some meta-research suggests that women are more prone to it. It's kind of similar to ethnical minorities. They kind of feel that they have to prove themselves more because there are in minority, and women in IT, maybe especially in DevOps, are a little bit in minority for now. If you Google top 10 celebrities with impostor syndrome, we'll find a lot of similar quotes, right? There are some doubts about my competence. Every time I need to do something, I have to open my mouth, I have to prove that I'm really good. No matter what you did, basically, there is this doubt, and there is this theme that somebody at some point will discover, right, that I'm the imposter, and they will take everything from me. There is this feeling of inadequacy, and again, this theme of being discovered, which is crippling. All right, so let's look into the mind of a person with impostor syndrome now. So whenever a person is successful with tasks or challenges, it's attributed to one of two things, two set of things, we could say. One is external factors, right? So it's not that I was successful because I'm good, I'm intelligent, I'm competent, but because there was something going on around, right? I was lucky. There were sort of circumstances. So for instance, I was applying for a job, right? And I was the only person who was applying, and the company needed somebody badly, so obviously they had to hire me, right? So circumstances. I was able to deceive the recruiter that I'm better than I actually are, right? There was maybe some misjudgment. For instance, they sent a non-technical manager to check me, and I was smooth, etc., but wasn't really able to check my technical skills, right? So misjudgment on the part of the recruiter. Or maybe I had some connections. I was able to do something because of my contacts, right? And disclaimer here, your contacts is your assets, right? There is no shame in using your network of people to, get stuff done or get to the conference, get a job, stuff like this. Of course, we are not talking about some pathological situation like in Polish politics, for instance, or any other politics for that matter, probably. But, just healthy network of people is an asset. So we have one option, some external factors, right? The second option is overwork. So I was successful because I put a lot of work. I was sitting like 16 hours a day, etc. I wasn't even logging this time in the company system because they would find out that I needed more time to do this. In my head, some average Joe would do this twice as fast. So I was only successful because I put additional hours, countless reviews, checking everything multiple times, stuff like this. So now we have to be aware that in our head we have this belief system, the belief filter. So the word is basically very complicated, and we need some simplifications. So we are creating some explanations for different stuff. We are creating categories for people, for things, etc. And it's kind of difficult to change that. It kind of forms up until you are more or less 20 years old. So it's the genetic lottery, what genes you have, and your upbringing for the first 20 years. And then when you create in your head this system of beliefs, this filter, then everything that happens around you goes through that filter, right? And if it doesn't fit your constructed view of the world, it's you kind of bend it to fit, right? If it contradicts, you might just plainly discard it, right? You probably all have this feeling that you read something or heard something, and it just kind of like a pain in your head. It doesn't fit your belief system, right? It will be important a little bit later. Zeros and ones. We are in the IT industry, so zeros and ones seems like something that we like, but it's again about this perfectionism, right? So people with impostor syndrome tend to have this view that something is either perfect, so this is 1, or something is trash, so this is 0. And even if it's 0.95, 98, 99, then what we do, we run down to the nearest, to the lowest integer, right? And it's 0 in our head. So we have to be careful with that. There is a scale of grayness between 0 and 1. And how this applies to IT industry or knowledge work in general, right? We have, or at least we choose to believe that we are quite smart people. So there is this intelligence. We tend to overthink problem and see some dark solutions in front of us. There is this intangibility. So what does it mean? Our industry is kind of, for people outside from it, it's kind of like a magic. It's difficult to describe what we really do. Like, try to do an experiment and describe to your grandma or your mother that you wrote a nice suite of automated tests, right? Or your method has low psychometric complexity or something like this, right? Difficult to explain. If you compare this to some classical examples, like classical trades, say a blacksmith, medieval blacksmith that is forging swords, right? We have a sword. We can check if it's balanced, if it has sharp edge. Maybe let's not do it with your finger, but we could do that. We can see if it has some nice ornaments, if it looks nice. We can look at baker who bakes bread, or maybe a painter who does some art. We can judge it. But in IT, it's kind of a little bit difficult. And whenever it is difficult to explain what we are doing or to judge it, there is some opportunity for doubts, right? And if there is some opportunity for doubts, we might feel like impostors, basically. Our industry is growing very fast, right? So Uncle Bob, I think 8 or something like this years ago, mentioned that half of people in IT has less than 5 years of experience, right? So there is a great influx of people from outside. Those people are creating a lot of tools and stuff that we use. So we have new version of languages, frameworks, libraries, tools, solutions, etc. We have like a lot of new layers of abstraction where we can solve some problems, right? And you can feel actually quite overwhelmed with that, right? I'm in the industry for several years, maybe 10 or more, but there is still so many things going on. And in my head, I'm kind of, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I should know this and the newest version of Java or Kubernetes or something, but I really don't. So it's tricky. And we have this like atmosphere of fake it till you make it, right? So we see in the social media a lot of posts like this startup solved hunger in Africa, right? The startup created a cure for AIDS or something, right? We see all of that and it's, okay, they are doing great, and what about me? But we have to take it with a grain of salt, what you see in social media. All right, so let's see at some risks. What can go wrong with impostor syndrome? So first of all, when you're afraid that you're going to be discovered, you have this defensive process that is running in your head all the time. You have to be careful what you are saying, who is around you, what's the situation, and it's basically, like a process on a computer. It takes up your computing cycles, right? And it takes up your mental energy or willpower, if you will. And you are simply more tired at the end of the day of having that active all the time, right? If you're afraid that you are going to be discovered as a fraud, then there might be some anxiety issues. At the end, there is this whole thing of burnout. There's like this 12 stages of burnout, topic for another presentation, books. There are many about this. And in the end, you can actually get into some real mental problems, such as depression or similar. So what else? The problem with balance. So if you choose this path of overwork, then obviously you will sacrifice some of your private time to do this additional work, to make sure that everything is done and you are not being discovered as an imposter, right? Your relations, if you're afraid of being discovered, you will naturally keep your distance privately, but also at work with your colleagues. If you keep your distance, then there is this, security buffer that maybe they will not discover that if I will have this buffer. There's a little bit of procrastination there, right? So I will have a tendency to postpone tasks where I might be discovered, right? Maybe I will choose some tasks that I'm familiar with, easier, but if there is some moment of test, maybe let's try to do this later. And this can influence priorities, right? We have a sprint, we might have some tasks in sprint, and some of them are important, but maybe more difficult, and we might choose to, maybe do this later. Maybe it will be too late in the end, and in the end we can actually fail the sprint, and it will be a problem, right? But maybe if we could try this difficult task first, we could just solve it. But we will try to avoid it. And what? We are afraid of changes, right? So we are not going to look for a new job. We are not going to look for a new project. If we are in software house, we'll just miss a lot of opportunities, right? What can we miss? So knowledge and skills, basically. If you don't go out from your comfort zone, well, you will be slower to learn, right? If you'll be afraid to ask questions, experiment and fail, you will lose some opportunities to learn and to increase your skills and knowledge, right? You might miss some promotions, so your boss might not see you as somebody who is worthy of promoting or giving you a raise, right? Especially in maybe our difficult times currently. And in the end, from the other side, your team, your tribe or department or whatever, your company and the whole industry kind of misses the ideas that you could express if you were not afraid, right? Okay, so let's look at some mechanisms now. Some realizations about imposter syndrome. So first of all, maybe the most important, the realization that there is something like an imposter syndrome, right? It's not that there's something wrong with me. It's this psychological thing, right? It has some mechanisms, it has some inner workings. The second, it's very common. It's not like 1% of people have imposter syndrome. It's like probably half of us, right, as we are sitting here. And whether it is solvable or not, that's kind of like a philosophical question. Like, can you get rid of all your demons from your head, right? It's difficult to answer that, but for sure you can learn how to live with that, how to mitigate, right? How to drink tea with your inner demons, so it's worth to try. In order not to be too softish on this talk, I have a diagram for you. So this is like a central mechanism in imposter syndrome, imposter cycle. We are running in those cycles, and each cycle, this feeling of being an imposter is strengthened, right? So how it works, you have a task, right? We start to worry about it. Oh, I will fail this time, I will be doomed, etc. There is some nervousness, but then at some point we have to make some decisions. So we can go one of two ways. Either we do over preparation, right? So we spend a lot of time, extra hours, not log it into company system, etc. Or we can just procrastinate. So okay, maybe this time they will discover there is nothing I can do, or maybe this time I will be lucky, right? So I will just postpone it. And we'll see. It kind of reminds me of the situation when I was at the university and you are cramming for the exam last 1 hour or something like this, and at some point you are saying, okay, fuck it, I close the book, I just get up, go for a walk, get a coffee, something like this. So this is basically procrastination, right? I'm putting away the thing that there is a test in front of me or a challenge, right? And now, since we are, oh come on, I should be getting up now. Since we are competent, right, we succeeded in this task, right? And now we are getting this feedback that we are good. And what happens with the feedback in our belief systems and belief filter? It is basically discarded because we don't think about ourselves as being good, right? So we discard this feedback. But we have an explanation why we are successful, and depending on the way you have chosen, it's either this over-preparation or lack. So, right, I'm not good, I'm not competent, I'm not skillful. It happened because of something. So the explanation is that I'm an imposter, right? And then it happens again and again and again, and it just got stronger. All right, the perception of knowledge. So as I was mentioning, we are creating those categories for people. So in our head, to simplify things, we have this category. This is a developer, this is DevOps, this is QA, this is manager, etc. And they are roughly the same. So imagine you are talking to one DevOps, gives you a piece of information. One, second DevOps, another piece of information, third one, yet another. And what happens in your head is you kind of join all those information, all those people, and in your head, every DevOps knows all those things, all those three things, right? And the result is that you think that your knowledge is this very small circle and everyone else knows a lot, right? Whereas in reality, it's the other image where everyone might have kind of similar knowledge to yours. We have the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? This is the relation between competence and confidence. And disclaimer, we are not good at differentiating between competence and confidence. If somebody is speaking in a confident manner, right, we kind of assume that the person is competent as well. Now, what happens when you start a new career or you learn new skills? You are quite quickly getting like the green path, something is working, right? You have a little bit of competence, but you quickly get confidence that, yeah, I'm good, right? I kind of see this in software development. People that have one and a half years of experience, like a junior developers maybe approaching the mid-level, are usually in this zone. This experience from technical recruitment, but also probably my own, like 12 years ago or something like this. So, you know, you think of yourself, hey, I have, let's say, Kubernetes 9 out of 10, Java 9 out of 10, SQL 9 out of 10, give me job, give me raise, I'm great, right? But then there are another projects, you have some fuck-ups, you have different companies, you realize how vast is the field in front of you, right? And you are sliding down to this valley of despair. You lose your confidence. And then only slowly you are regaining this back as you got more experience and skills. And how is it relevant to imposter syndrome? So if you are somewhere there, right, and you see people somewhere there, you might think that, hey, this guy has like I have 3 times more experience or 2 times more experience, but he or she is much more competent, right? Well, in fact, it's not competence, but just a feeling of confidence. So be careful with that when you compare yourself to other people. It might be just that you are on the different points in the Dunning-Kruger effect chart. Okay, there's the spotlight effect. So we are kind of more selfish than we would like to admit to, right? So we kind of assume that other people are focused on us, right? So watch us for every mistake that we make. But in fact, people are mostly concerned with themselves. Like imagine we are doing some group photo, for instance, right? So you are looking at this photo later. So what's the first thing that you do? Exactly, right? If my tie is straight, if I'm not stained with a sauce, etc., you don't really care about other people that much, right? So whenever you are in some public situation or just, you know, talking in a group of people, other people don't actively look for your mistakes usually. So don't be afraid to speak up, basically. There's the curse of knowledge. So small children have this feature that they assume that every other child has the same knowledge and feelings as themselves, right? We kind of grew up from that to an extent, right? So there is this typical comic situation between technical people and business people, and they assume that each other knows those terms like technical or business stuff, and there is some miscommunication. But another angle to this is that a lot of people don't believe that they have some useful knowledge. They assume that everyone else knows this, right? I had this experience of being a guild master of Java in our company for 2 years. And the part of this job was to look for people who would like to speak at our events, like quarterly events. And people were quite shy, that was natural, but also usually they say that everyone else knows this topic that I would speak about, right? But if you are a senior developer or DevOps, you can just share your experience, right? Real life experience in your projects. If you are more junior, you can just, you know, research some new library, check the new version of language or something like that. There are still presentations about what's new in Java 21 or something on big conferences by big speakers, and people are going to that, right? Because not everyone has time to just research this on their own. So if you think of yourself that I won't be a public speaker because everybody else knows this, just remember about this slide. All right. So let's go to some practicality. There was a thread on Twitter or X or whatever this is called now, where people from IT, from engineering, sciences were sharing of what seemingly basic stuff they have to look up, Google, check their notes, copy from previous projects, etc. Right? So disclaimer, everyone does this, right? Everyone Googles how to center this damn div, right? Or asks ChatGPT, and there is no shame in that, basically. My personal confession here as a 12 years of experience in Java is that I don't remember how to read a file from a disk to memory still, because there were, you know, streams that are nested in each other, and I always Google that. I used to know like 10 years ago probably when I was doing the certification, but no more. So don't be afraid, especially if you are more on the junior side. You might have this feeling that I need to know every method in this library or framework, otherwise I'm just trash. It's not true. We just Google stuff. About comparisons, right? We tend to compare ourselves to other people, and there is a caveat to that, right? As in object-oriented programming, let's objectify people now, assume we are objects. So about yourself, you know all your internal state, all your private methods, stuff like this, the history of changes in your state, stuff like that. And about other people, you only see this public stuff that they choose to show you. And even after that, it goes through this belief filter, right? So actually the only good method is comparing yourself to an aerial snapshot of yourself in time. So what have you learned in the last month, year, 10 years, something like this. Now, Japanese people have this idea, they have this art of fixing broken ceramics with gold, right? And they have this idea that if something is imperfect, it has some cracks, something like this. If it's an item, piece of work, a person, like a war wounds, for instance, scars, or maybe mental scars, it kind of makes them unique and gives them soul. Right? So if you think of yourself that you are somehow broken, you might think that you have a soul, and it sounds a little bit better. All right, achievements. Who plays computer games with achievements? We have some gamers here, okay. So achievements in games are there for a reason, right? To give us a little bit shot of dopamine, okay. So we might try to use something similar to our advantage. You can create a list of your achievements. So what studies you have finished, what courses, what projects, what books have you read, what conference you went to, whatever rocks your boat. Create this list, and whenever you feel down about yourself, you can get back to the list and see, oh, okay, maybe it's not so bad, objectively, right? Some people say that if you create this in a physical form on a piece of paper with a pencil or a pen, it has like a more power, right? We have this, clouds, 9 backups, etc. But in the end, if something is physical, maybe it has more meaning. And you can put it in your drawer, use it later, unless your house burns down or your dog eats it. But otherwise, it's there. Social media, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, so be careful of what you see on social media. It's not that everyone around you is just, going around conferences, doing blogs. They are like chief architects or something, or saving the world. Everything that everyone publishes on social media is, kind of the best sides of them, and it should go with a grain of salt. We have the job ads, so space unicorns. Sometimes you see the ad with a lot of points that you should know this, and this. You should be expert in that. So again, this is usually a wish list, right? So it's a good idea to try to apply if you see something interesting, even if you don't check all the points, because it might happen that there is 2 people in the world that actually do. So you can just try and see what happens, right? There is a piece of trivia here. Again, in the 70s, there was internal research at IBM. Actually, it's connected with genders, that they realized that men have this tendency to apply for a job if they check around 60% of requirements, and ladies needed around 80–90%. So maybe a little bit less confidence there. So ladies be more confident with applying. We have the reptile brain of software developers and DevOps. So our brain evolved over hundreds of millions of years, right? We have this core layers that takes care about life-death situations, stuff like this, and then we have this new part, the neocortex, that does, Kubernetes deployment and stuff like this. So whenever you get into the situation that you have some technical problem, you don't understand something, right? Something is difficult, something doesn't work again and again, and there are those feelings in your head that, damn, I'm so stupid, I can't get it, I will be fired, right? You start to worry about this, you're afraid. And what happens when you're afraid? The blood flow, yeah? Yes, the blood flow to the neocortex is shut down, and your brain goes into the fight or flight or maybe freeze mode, right? So you are looking for a, tiger or something. If it eats you, or if you should fight it or something. So basically, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you are afraid that you are stupid, you make yourself stupid at this point. So try to detect those situations, and whenever you find out that you are in this situation, just try to break it. Get up, go for a walk, for a drink, make a break, something like this. Talk to somebody. Try to just break away from this thought. Talent. So is there something like talent? So there's this famous quote by Edison that success is 99% of hard work, 1% of talent. So they say that successful people are those who try again and again, maybe modify something, but try different ways of do something. They fail a lot, but they still try. And indeed, if you would like to try something a lot and it still fails, you have to probably like it, right? So it's a good idea to look for things in IT that you actually like doing, despite maybe not always being successful at it, right? We have quite a broad field. You can program, you can do DevOps, you can be an architect, you can organize stuff, you can talk on conferences, you can go management, etc. You can be a Scrum Master, product owner. So my advice here is to just try different things. If you think that maybe there is something better for you in some different place in IT, just try it and see how it works for you. You can even do this without changing the label. I can still be DevOps or Java developer, but I can I don't know, do the retrospective for the team or something like this. Maybe it's that you have talent for different things than producing just a lot of lines of code, right? Some people have this, managers maybe have this measurement of efficiency, like developers can produce this many lines of code per day, right? Of course, that's a shitty KPI, right? Because some developers have other talents. They are great organizers. They can do, they see a lot of problems that can happen. They can see details, or maybe they can deliver the solution very fast, but maybe they are just like this, the good spirit of a team, this person that holds the team together, but doesn't write that many lines of code, right? And if you remove this person from the team, it turns out like the efficiency drops by half of the whole team, right? So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So try to experiment a little bit. Then we have recruitment. If you happen to be technical recruiter, this is a nice opportunity, to see this, one of those previous slides, that it's not the case that everyone knows what you know, right? A lot of people that you will be interviewing might not know a lot of things. And this is a caveat here. You might be tempted to come up with these difficult questions, right? To see those methods and frameworks that everybody has to Google. They don't know this by heart. So don't do this, basically, right? So the idea of recruitment is to find nice people for our company, not to lift your ego, but you can help yourself a little bit in the process as well. Talking to people. So who of you is working fully remotely? Raise your hand. And who of those people who raised hand have an office in the same city? Okay. So after the pandemic, we kind of, went into this mode that I will stay in my cave and don't go to work. And if you have impostor syndrome, you might have an idea that if you hide in your cave, you don't talk to people, then you will be safe, nobody will discover, right? But if you want to be cured from impostor syndrome, you have to expose yourself to the stressor, right? So I was the person, for 2 years I was going maybe once per 2 months, something like this, to the office. But then I switched to more or less once per week, and it was quite helpful to actually see those people live, drink coffee, etc. So I encourage you to, if you don't have like a bad commute or something, of course it depends on the personal situation, etc. But maybe try a little bit to go to the office or at least to the conference, which you did already. So that's nice. Kind of connected. If you suspect that you have some people with heavy imposter syndrome in your vicinity, you can try to kind of normalize that nobody is perfect. You can share some of your, difficult experiences, that you did some failures, you didn't feel very well about yourself, etc. So try to normalize that we don't have to be perfect and know everything, and it kind of helps those people by osmosis maybe or something like this, right? That's a trick, especially if you're a team leader. That works, but also if you just want to be a good colleague. There's a book by Miłosz Brzeziński called Głaskologia. Anyone has read that? Okay, there's one person. So there's an idea that in this book that we have this like a tank or jar of sweetness, right? And we can add to this jar the honey, add honey, or remove honey from this jar. Whenever you have positive interaction with a person, so if you give a good feedback, appreciation, have some nice interactions, you kind of add to this tank of sweetness. When you have some difficult interaction, like you have to give a difficult feedback, for instance, you remove from this tank, right? So what happens if you try to remove from an empty tank? Right, it doesn't end very well. So try to, stack exception. Exactly. So we don't want that exceptions to happen. So it's a good idea to take care with your core workers, people around you, to take care of this tank. Add a little bit sweetness sometimes. Give them some honest compliments about their work, for instance. Help them from time to time. Some good feedback. Maybe it could be something as little as putting a like at the message on the Teams channel or on whatever social media you are together, and that helps. The recommended ratio of good interactions to difficult interactions is between 3:1 or 5:1, more or less, in this book. Kind of last but not least, if you feel that you are still not doing very well and you need a little bit of help, don't be ashamed of going to a professional, right? We have this, especially in Poland, maybe this kind of social stigma that, okay, I'm not crazy, I'm not going to psychologist or psychiatrist, but it's normal, right? In the Western world, it's kind of normal that everyone has their own shrink, right? And don't be ashamed of that. A lot of companies, especially after the pandemic, have some programs to help with that, like free consultations, something like this. So you can look for that in your company, maybe propose something like this. If you want to measure yourself, right? How much impostor syndrome do you have? There, of course, are some metrics for that. So there is the Clance IP scale. Pauline Clance was one of the authors of this initial paper in the 70s. IP stands from impostor phenomena. So if you Google this Clance IP scale, you will find a 20 questions PDF. You can rate yourself. If you don't want to calculate this manually, you can just look at psychtest.org, I believe. There are some tests based on that. I did a few of them, normalized that to 100%. It turns out that I have around 42% of impostor syndrome still. But I believe it's much better than, for instance, 10 years ago. Now I clearly remember those cycles, impostor cycles, when each sprint I was doing in the company was, okay, this is the last time they will find out, right? Next time. So that was 10 or 15 years ago, something like that. And it got better a little bit. Right, so this QR code leads to my LinkedIn, so I welcome you all to join the network. I'm also on Twitter or X or whatever, mostly programmer humor there. Also on Instagram, if you like those pictures, most of them generated by Midjourney. There's more artwork in this style there. If you like to read a little bit, or you want to have notes from that presentation, I have a blog. It has Java in name, but don't be afraid. It's not about Java anymore. It's more about general software and people I would say. So there's an article, few articles back about impostor syndrome. There might be some additional links there, like for this thread on Twitter with people that were sharing what they have to check, obvious things that they need to check. All right, so basically that's it. So take care of yourselves and others around you. Thank you very much.